Beyond a cello and a violin's shared looks and role in an orchestral setting, they also have some connections in geometry, density, and probability. Heck, one could even say for their geometry that they're similar. Let's tune in, shall we? Sorry, ChatGPT can be pretty stupid sometimes. When I asked it to generate jokes, I didn't mean to generate bad puns. Anyways. The cello was created to support the bass line in an orchestra. Since the violin came before it, the cello was designed with a lot of the violin's principles, including borrowing the violin's shape. In fact, the average cello looks just like the violin on the outside, but scaled up. But is it really? Is the cello really just a scaled up version of the violin, or does it have different proportions? Or using mathematical terms, are the two objects similar? If they are, just how much is the cello scaled up by? Now, to gather data for this, I know the school's cello is full size, just like my violin, so I went ahead and measured the school's cello and compared it against the measurements of my own violin. Here's the data. After some calculations, the factor for each side averages out to approximately 2. In other words, the cello is approximately 2 times bigger than the violin. This also proves that they are similar to each other, since one can be scaled by a factor and have approximately the same dimensions as the other. Of course, when I say the cello is 2 times bigger, I'm not talking about the volume. That value will be 2 to the power of 3, which is 8. The cello is 8 times bigger than the violin volume-wise. If you're talking about surface area, that would be 2 to the power of 2, or 4 times bigger. This makes the cello harder to produce, as the surface area requires at least 4 times as much material, and the increased weight means it requires better craftsmanship and materials to make it as durable as the violin. In fact, the cello might need to be even more durable because its big size is prone to damage. This is also basically the long answer as to why a cello costs more than a violin. You might notice that in the data given, I didn't measure the cello's weight. Well, there weren't any scales in the school, so that's why. But we can get a pretty good idea of what the weight is, assuming both instruments do have the same density. With the current data, we can work out the violin's density and then calculate the cello's weight by taking consideration into how many times it is bigger volume-wise. All in all, we arrive at a density of approximately 170 kilograms per cubic meter, and a weight of approximately 4,600 grams. However, a quick Google search tells us that an average full-size cello is around 3,000 grams, which is quite a bit lighter than our number. And this was actually designed out of practicality. Not only does it help the cello players from spending all of their energy keeping the cello upright, it also makes the instrument resonate better. According to an article I found, quote, "The heavier an object is, the more force it takes to get it to move. Since stringed instruments have to vibrate to make sound, the lighter they are, the easier it'll be to get the sound to start, and the more sound should come out." With our new data, assuming the cello is indeed 3,000 grams, we can find out that the cello's density will be approximately 100 kilograms per cubic meter. So the other day, I was talking to a cellist friend of mine, and he mentioned that the cellos have already began shifting when us violinists were still stuck in first position. Now, eventually I realized this phenomenon is because, due to the violin's smaller size, it's simply more likely for a beginner to land somewhere away from the note they're trying to reach, compared to shifting on a cello. To demonstrate this, if you have ever played a cello before, moving your finger by half a centimeter doesn't do much to the intonation. Whereas on the violin, if you were to move by the same amount, it becomes quite clear that you are changing the note. Say a player wants to land in a certain area on the string, let's say this area, to produce a note between this one and this one. Looking at the cello and the violin together, as you can see, the size of the finger is constant, but the area in which the finger needs to be is not. The area is smaller on the violin because it's relative to the string's size. It turns out that with the probabilities being 15% for the violin and 32.5% for the cello, it's more than twice as likely for a violinist to shift to a wrong note than would be for a cellist, even if both are just pressing randomly. Apart from this practical difficulty white violins have, there's another reason why we don't shift into an intermediate level. With the first position alone, you have access to more or less 2 full octaves, depending on the piece that you're playing. Hence, there isn't a good reason why you want to shift if you already have access to a lot of notes in the first place, which is what shifting is supposed to achieve, mind you. The same logic can be applied to cellists. Because of a cello's big size, cellists really don't have access to that many notes in the first position alone. They have like, 1 octave, 1.5 if you're lucky, only? Either way, on a cello, you're almost forced to shift to have access to enough notes as to reasonably play a piece.